I actually thought it pretty funny if, let's just say, I wonder if Letterman ever wishes that he didn't quit his show and he was just still doing the show on CBS at the Ed Sullivan Theater. And what if he really did wish that he didn't quit his show and he could actually have his show back? And then subsequently, if he found out that since he quit, it was like too late to get the show back. So then he was like, he really just he really misses doing his show, and he misses kind of like the that kind of exciting feeling you get from like a nightly performance, and like just the feedback from the audience between him and the audience. So then, because well, not I mean he's rich and everything, so that's good. He's got that going for him. But he's living in like Montana, I think. So I don't know what the hell he does there. It might be kind of boring. So what if he actually thought that he misses having the show and so then he drove back to New York to try to get the show back. He found out that it was too late to get the show back. And I don't know. So then he just thought, well, you know what he could do instead? He could like rent out somebody's garage and do the show from inside the garage, get Paul Schaefer back in the show, and like have kind of like a low budget version of the Late Show with David Letterman. And somebody's like, let's say in somebody's garage in like suburban New York, in the suburbs of New York, somebody's garage, have the show on there, have it like on maybe just on YouTube or something. It'd be like a Late Show with David Letterman, but on YouTube. And yeah, but like since he probably can't afford like the A-list celebrities, you'd have to get people like just ordinary everyday people to be on the show. And he could have like demonstrations. He could be, I don't know, he could do a lot of stuff. Maybe he could even like have teach lessons to pre-doctoral students. Like from the book of Gray's Anatomy. Let me get that out. Gray's Anatomy. Okay. Okay. Gray's Anatomy. Let's see. So this would be David Letterman broadcast from on YouTube. It'd be him on YouTube giving with Paul Schaefer, but it's not just going to be like a comedic show, but it's going to be very like educational too. It's going to be like just very, and it might even be like also like a kind of like a primer for like pre-med students. So he's going to be teaching us some of the human anatomy from Gray's Anatomy. I got the book here. Okay. The various bones of which the skeleton consists are connected together at different parts of their surfaces, and such a connection is designated by the name of joint or articulation. If the joint is immovable, as between the cranial and most of the facial bones, the adjacent margins of the bones are applied in almost close contact, a thin layer of fibrous membrane, a sutural ligament. And at the base of the skull, in certain situations, a thin layer of cartilage being interposed, where slight movement is required, combined with great strength, the osseous surfaces are united by tough and elastic fibrocartilages. As in the joints between the vertebral bones and interpubic articulations, but in the movable joints, the bones forming the articulation are generally expanded for greater convenience of mutual connection, covered by cartilage, held together by strong bands or capsules of fibrous tissue called ligaments, and partially lined by a membrane, the synovial membrane, which secretes a fluid to lubricate the various parts of which the joint is formed. I don't know why this is funny, but to me it is. Okay. So that the structures which enter into the formation of a joint are bone, cartilage, fibrocartilage, ligament, and synovial membrane. Bone, the definition, constitutes a fundamental element of all the joints. In the long bones, the extremities are the parts which form the articulations. They are generally somewhat enlarged, consisting of spongy, cancellous tissue with a thin coating of compact substance. In the flat bones, the articulations usually take place at the edges and in the short bones at various parts of their surface. The layer of the compact bone, which forms the articular surface into which the cartilage is attached, is called the articular lamella. It is of white color, extremely dense, and varies in thickness. Its structures differ from ordinary bone tissue in this respect. You know what's funny about this? The name of this broadcast that I'm doing right now is California Beach Titty Fuck, and I'm reading from Gray's Anatomy. Okay. Its structure differs from ordinary bone tissue in this respect that it contains no Haversian canals. Okay. And its lacuna are much larger than in ordinary bone and have no canal calus. What? The vessels of the cancellous tissue, as they approach the articular lamella, turn back in loops and do not perforate it. This layer is consequently more dense and firmer than ordinary bone, and is evidently designed to form a firm and unyielding support for the articular cartilage. The cartilage, which covers the articular surfaces of the bone and is called the articular, will be found described with other varieties of cartilage in the section in general anatomy. Ligaments consist of bands of various forms, serving to connect together the articular extremities of the bones and composed mainly of bundles of white fibrous tissue placed parallel with or closely interlaced with one another and presenting a white, shining, silvery aspect. So let's pretend I'm like a medical professor at the University of Harvard, which is Harvard University, right? Okay. Okay. Good evening, class. Tonight's lesson is going to be on the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system. Okay. The lymphatic system includes not only the lymphatic vessels and the glands through which they pass, but also the lacteal or clivorous vessels. The lacteals are the lymphatic vessels of the small intestine and differ in no respect from the lymphatics generally, excepting that they contain a milk-white fluid, the chyle, during the process of digestion and convey it to the blood through the thoracic duct. The lymphatics have derived their name from their appearance of the fluid contained in their interior, lympha, water. They are called the absorbents from the property they possess of absorbing certain materials from the tissues and conveying them into the circulation. The lymphatics are exceedingly delicate vessels, the coats of which are so transparent that the fluid they contain is readily seen through them. They retain a nearly uniform size, being interrupted at intervals by constrictions, which give them a knotted or beaded appearance. These constrictions are due to the presence of valves in their interior. Lymphatics have been found in nearly every texture and organ of the body which contain blood vessels. Such non-vascular structures as cartilage, the nails, cuticle, and hair have none, but with these exceptions, it is probable that eventually all parts will be found to be permeated by these vessels. That was the lymphatic system. Now the eye. Okay. The organs of special sense. The sclerotic and cornea. The sclerotic and cornea, as you can see in figure 440, from the external tunic of the eyeball, they are essentially fibrous in structure, the sclerotic being opaque and forming the posterior 5/6 of the globe, the cornea, which forms the remaining sixth, being transparent. The sclerotic has received its name from its extreme density and hardness. It is firm, unyielding, fibrous membrane, serving to maintain the form of the globe. It is much thicker behind than in front. Its external surface is of a white color and is in contact with the inner surface of the capsules of tenon. It is quite smooth, except at the points where the recti and oblique muscles are inserted into it, and its interior part is covered by the conjunctival membrane, hence the whiteness and brilliancy of the front of the eyeball. Let's see. Okay, the dorsal vertebrae. Let's do that one. The dorsal vertebrae. Well, the seventh cervical, figure 4, the most distinctive character of this vertebrae is the existence of a very long and prominent spinous process. Hence the name vertebra, prominence. This process is thick, nearly horizontal in direction, not bifurcated, and has attached to it to the lower end of the ligamentum nuchae. The transverse process is usually of large size. Its posterior tubercles are large and usually a shallow groove, and it seldom presents more than a trace of bifurcation at its extremity. So this is what David Letterman would be talking about if he did the show again. Okay. Why not? It's called edutainment. Okay. The cranium. Let's do that part. The skull. The skull is supported on the summit of the vertebral column and is of an oval shape, wider behind than in front. It is composed of a series of flattened or irregularly shaped bones, which, with one exception, the lower jaw, are immovably joined together. It is divided into two parts. The cranium and the face, the former of which constitutes a case for the accommodation and protection of the brain, while opening on the face are the orifices of the nose and the mouth. Between the cranium and above the face, below the orbital cavities are situated. The cranium is composed of 8 bones, by the occipital, 2 parietal, frontal, 2 temporal, sphenoid, and ethmoid. The face is composed of 14 bones. The 2 nasal, 2 superior maxillary, 2 lacrimal, 2 molar, 2 palate, 2 inferior turbinated vomer, and inferior maxillary, the acicula aortis, the teeth, and Wormian bones are not included in this enumeration. Condyles, which are the bone articulates with the atlas. These processes are known as the condylar portions. It presents for examination two surfaces, two borders, and four angles. The external surface is convex, midway between the summit of the bone and the posterior margin. The foramen magnum is prominent tubercle, and the external occipital protuberance. And descending from it as far as the foramen, a vertical ridge, the external occipital crest. This protuberance and crest give attachment to the ligamentum nuchae and vary in prominence in different scales. Passing outward from the occipital protuberance is a seminal ridge on each side, the superior curved line. Above this line, there is often a second, less distinctly marked ridge called the highest curved line, linea suprema. Two of the epicranial aponeurosis is attached. The bone between these two lines is smoother and denser than the rest of the surface. Running parallel from the middle of the crest is another semicircular ridge. On each side, the inferior curved lines, the surface of the bone above the linea suprema is rough and porous, and in the recent state is covered by the occipital frontalis muscle, while the superior and inferior curved lines, together with the surfaces of the bone between and below them, serve for the attachment of several muscles. The superior curved line gives attachment internally to the trapezius, externally to the muscular origin, the occipital frontalis. So this would be like this is Jack Nicholson giving pre-med students a lesson on Gray's Anatomy. Into the sternocleidomastoid mastoid to the extent shown in figure 23, the depressions between the curved lines of the complex is shown in figure the splenius capitis and the obliquus capitis superior externally. The inferior curved line of the depressions, the foramen magnum and a large oval aperture in long diameter extending from before backwards. Okay, and this would be just the plain old me giving the pre-med students lesson on the human anatomy. Let me turn to another part of the anatomy. What do you want me to read to you? Which part of the anatomy would you like to learn about? Or is it too boring? Okay. How about the hemispheres of the brain? Let's learn about that. Okay. I was always interested in that. Okay, the nervous system. The nervous system is composed of a series of large centers of nerve matter called collectively the cerebrospinal centers or cerebrospinal axis. 2 of smaller centers termed ganglia. 3 of nerves connected either with the cerebrospinal axis or the ganglia. And 4 of certain modifications of the peripheral terminations of the nerves forming the organs of the external senses. The cerebral spinal axis consists of the brain, or encephalon, and the spinal cord, which are contained within the skull and spinal canal. The brain and its membranes will be first considered, and then the spinal cord and its coverings. The membranes of the brain. Dissection. To examine the brain with its membranes, the skull cap must be removed. In order to effect this, saw through the external table, the section commencing in front about an inch above the margin of the orbit and extending behind to a little above the level with the occipital protuberance. Then break the internal table with a chisel and hammer to avoid injuring the investing membranes or brain. Loosen and forcibly detach the skull cap. Sounds like a horror movie. When the dura matter will be exposed. The adhesion between the bone and the dura mater is very intimate and much more so in the young subject than in the adult. The membranes of the brain are the dura mater, arachnoid membrane, and pia mater. The dura mater. The dura mater is a thick and dense inelastic fibrous membrane which lines the interior of the skull. Its outer surface is rough and fibrillated and adheres closely to the inner surfaces of the bones, forming their internal periosteum, I guess is how it's pronounced. This adhesion being most marked opposite the structures at the base of the skull. Its inner surface is smooth and lined by a layer of endothelium. It sends four processes inward and into the cavity of the skull for the support and protection of the different parts of the brain, and is prolonged to the outer surface of the skull through the various foramina which exist at the base, and thus becomes continuous with the pericranium. Its fibrous layer forms sheaths for the nerves which pass through these apertures. At the base of the skull, it sends a fibrous prolongation to the foramen axium. It sends a series of tubular prolongations around the filaments of olfactory nerves as they pass through the cribriform plate, and also around the nasal nerve as it passes through the nasal slit. A prolongation is also continued through the sphenoidal fissure into the orbit, and another is continued in the same cavity through the optic foramen, forming a sheath for the optic nerve, which is continued as far as the eyeball. In the posterior fossa is auditory nerves, another through the jugular foramen, forming a sheath for the structures which pass through this opening, and a third through the anterior kind of like foramen. Around the margin of the foramen magnum is closely adherent to the bone and is continuous with the dura mater living in the spinal canal. So just to remind you, what you're supposed to be imagining now is like David Letterman doing a show from a garage in the suburbs of New York with Paul Schaefer still as the band leader. And he's giving kind of like a lecture to people on like kind of like cable TV about, let's have it at cable TV about, that would be funny. That would be the skit. It's like people who can't afford to go to like Harvard. If you can't afford to go to Harvard, there's like a course you could take on cable, which is like a real cheap way to get like a medical degree, and it's David Letterman. So that's a funny idea. David Letterman he wishes that he can get his show back at the Ed Sullivan Theater. He can't because it's too late. It's been taken over by Stephen Colbert. But what he can get is he can get a cable show. Is a show on cable TV, a cable TV show, cable TV show. Yeah, cable TV show with David Letterman and Paul Schaefer in the same role that he was always in. And but it's actually, the show is actually a combination of like his usually comedy routine with, you know, maybe even Sully would want to be on it too. He could be on it too to reprise his roles, like the guy under the seats, or maybe like Biff Henderson would want to rejoin the cast. Okay. And so he would be like broadcasting live from a garage in the suburbs of New York. And also the show is also, there's a duality. The show is also like a course for like pre-med students who can't afford to go to like a really expensive fancy college, but they could learn like on it's like kind of like an online course, but this would be on cable. Okay. Cable TV. It would be on cable TV, and David Letterman would be kind of like the host of the show. I mean, he'd be the proctor of the show. Cable TV. Paul Schaefer, David Letterman on cable TV, giving a course to people who can't afford like a, you know, really good. But then again, if you earned a degree on cable TV with David Letterman as the professor of your pre-med studies, would you be able to get a good job as a doctor with those credentials on your resume? Do you think you'd be able to get a job as a doctor? Well, only one way to find out. So let's get back to where was I? Okay, wait, where was I? Oh, at the base of the skull is sends a fibrous prolongation to the foramen exit. A series of tubular prolongations run the filaments of the olfactory nerves as they pass through the cribriform plate, and also run the nasal nerves that passes through the nasal slit. Ooh, that sounds dirty. Okay, a prolongation. Speaking of dirty, let's go to the female anatomy. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's find the okay. Let's check that out. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Where the fuck is that? Okay. Well, I love this book. Anyways, okay. I mean, I read this book, Grey's Anatomy. To me, this book, Grey's Anatomy, is like, it's like a good read. It's actually, I don't know why more people aren't into it. Where the fuck is the, what I'm trying to find is the, no? Let's see. I'm trying to find the female. Okay, I'll look it up in the index. The female. Well, I wanted to find. Okay. Structurally. I think that's a really funny premise. I should what I could do is I could write that into a whole script. It would be David Letterman. He misses his show. He lives like in Montana or something like that, and lives on like a farm in there. But he He misses doing the show, so he returns to New York to try to get the show back. But it's too late. Stephen Colbert's got the show now, and he can't get it back. So what he does is he rents out a garage in suburban New York, and he does like some kind of like approximation of what the show used to be. But he doesn't have the budget to do the show the way he wants to do it, the way it used to be. So if he does a show that is kind of like part educational and part comedic, then he could get some kind of funding from the local university. They can fund his show if he's giving like some kind of like, you know, like some kind of, if he gives lectures to pre-med students at the local university, then he's given the funding to do the comedic part of the show. So that's why he's giving these lectures to the pre-med students. So how do you like that plot? I think that plays out pretty good. Okay. Yeah, I got to run with it. I could write that up into a full script. Okay. Where do I come up with these ideas? Okay, somebody's probably going to like take that idea and make $1 million off of it, and I'll just be sitting in this basement having a blast. Okay, let's see. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Where the fuck does... Okay. Where is it? Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, okay. Let's get to the female anatomy. There we go. There we go. The rectus abdominis is a long, flat muscle which extends along the whole length of the front of the abdomen, being separated from its fall of the opposite side by the linea alba. It is much broader but thinner above than below, and arises by two tendons, the external or larger being attached to the crest of this pubis. The internal smaller portion interlacing with its fellow of the opposite side and being connected with the ligaments covering the front of the symphysis pubis. The fibers ascend and the muscle is inserted by three portions of an unequal size, or the cartilage of the fifth, sixth, and seventh ribs. The upper portion, attached principally to the cartilage of the fifth rib, usually has some fibers of insertion to the anterior extremity of the rib itself. Some fibers are occasionally connected with the causoxiphoid ligaments inside of the ensiform cartilage. The rectus muscle is traversed by tendinous intersections, 3 in number, which have received the name of linea transversi. One of these is usually situated opposite the umbilicis and 2 above the point of the latter. One corresponds to the extremity of the ensiform cartilage, and the other to the interval between the ensiform cartilage and the embellius. These intersections pass transversely or obliquely across the muscles in a zigzag course. They rarely extend completely through its substance, sometimes pass only halfway across it, and are typically inherent in front of the sheath in which the muscle is enclosed. Sometimes 1 or 2 additional lines may be seen, one usually below the imbecillus. The position of the other, when it exists, is variable. These additional lines are, for the most part, incomplete. The rectus is enclosed in a sheath formed by these aponeurosis of the oblique and the transverse muscles, which are arranged in the following manner. When the appendices of the internal oblique arrives at the outer margin of the rectus, it divides into two lamellae, one of which is in front of the rectus, blending with the aponeurosis of the external oblique. Why am I laughing? Because I'm just thinking about, like, just imagine David Letterman giving like a lecture to pre-med students in a garage in suburban New York on cable TV. And okay. The other behind it, blending with the aponeurosis of the transversalis, and those joining again its inner border inserted into the linea alba. This arrangement of the aponeurosis exists in the upper 3/4 of the muscle. At the commencement of the lower fourth, the anterior wall of the sheath terminates at the thin curved margin. The similar fold of the Douglas, the concavity which looks downward towards the pubes. The the aponeurosis of the all three muscles passing in front of the rectus without any separation. Let's go to another part of the anatomy. Let's see. Okay, well, how about let's do the articulations of the spine with the cranium. Okay. The ligaments connecting the spine with the cranium may be divided into two shears. Those connecting the occipital bone with the atlas, and those connecting the occipital bone with the axis. Through articulation of the atlas with the occipital bone. The articulation is a double conoid joint. Its ligaments are the anterior occipital atlantal, posterior occipital atlantal, two lateral occipital atlantal, and two capsular. The anterior occipital atlantal ligaments, figure 158, is a broad membranous layer composed of densely woven fibers which passes between the anterior margin, the foramen magnum above, and the whole length of the upper border of the anterior arch of the atlas below. Laterally, it is continuous with its capsular ligaments, and the middle line in front of it is strengthened by a strong, narrow, rounded cord, with its attached above to the basilar process of the occiput, and below to the tubercle and the anterior arch of the atlas. Okay. This ligament is in its relation in front with a recti and what? Okay, whatever. Okay. The articulations of the pelvis. The ligaments connecting the bones of the pelvis with each other may be divided into 4 groups. 1, those connecting the sacrum and the ilium. 2, those passing between the sacrum and the ischium. 3, those connecting the sacrum and the coccyx. 4, those between the 2 pubic bones. 1, articulations of the sacrum and the ilium. The sacroiliac articulation is an amphiaral throatial joint formed between the lateral surfaces of the sacrum and the ilium. The anterior or articular portion of each articular surface is covered with a thin plate of cartilage, thicker on the sacrum than on the ilium. These are in close contact with each other and to a certain extent united together by irregular patches of soft fibrocartilage, and at their upper and posterior part by fine fibers of interosseous fibrous tissue. A considerable part of their extent, especially in advanced life, they are not connected together but are separated by a space containing a synovial-like fluid, and hence the joint presents the characters of a diorthosis. The ligaments connecting these surfaces are the anterior and posterior sacroiliac. The anterior sacroiliac ligament, figure 164, consists of numerous thin bands which connect the anterior surfaces of the sacrum and ilium. Okay, so that's it for tonight with the improvisational comedy. I'll see you soon.